Let's make some tomato sauce. We are starting with about 35 pounds of tomatoes. Hose those down, scrub any grit. Then into our big pot, we're gonna core them out, rough chop them, make sure to cut out any nasty bits. Move those to our burner. We're cooking outside today for a little bit. We just wanna bring these to a simmer or sort of a low boil till they're nice and stewed down. And what this is gonna do is help release any excess water when we go to strain them. Once they are where we want them, bring this over to a crate. You can line this with cheesecloth or a very sturdy paper towel. We are going to dump these out so that they can drain of any of that excess water. We lost a little bit of pulp, but that's okay. But for the most part, you can see we have excess water running off the table, and that's exactly what we want to get rid of. Once those drain for 15 minutes or so into the food mill, I like using a food mill. It's minimal waste. It literally just gets rid of the skins or leaves behind the skins and releases all that lovely thick pulp for our sauce. And while we worked on grinding those off, I chopped some garlic into our large pot back onto the burner, heated some olive oil, threw in that garlic, and as soon as we were done grinding off the tomatoes, we poured that over our garlic and brought it back to a simmer. And you can see we have a beautifully thick, delicious sauce. I moved the sauce into the kitchen then, tied off some of our fresh basil and oregano, threw that in, brought the sauce back to a simmer. And for 35 to 40 pounds of tomatoes, I used about a quarter of a cup of salt. I tasted for seasoning and I was happy with it. It was absolutely delicious. I brought out my big All-American canner. My mom got this for me, my favorite gift of all time. Sterilized some jars. Once the sauce simmered and the jars were hot and sterilized, I ladled them in to the bottom of the rim, added a tablespoon of red wine vinegar. You could also do lemon juice. And for good measure, top each one off with our fresh basil. Wiped the rims and applied the lids. Then into our pressure canner of 3 inches of boiling water. My absolute favorite feature to this model is that you can do a second layer. So you can do 2 full batches, which are typically 7 jars at a time. So instead of 7 jars, 14 at a time if you need it. Cuts down on the time immensely. Line up your lid, get everything sealed up, and proceed from there. Okay, so now that we got the jars of tomato sauce into the pressure canner, let's talk about what pressure cooking really is and what the steps are from here on out. So pressure canning is simply just a food preservation method at high temp under a certain weight of pressure depending on what you're pressure canning for a certain length of time. So we can't start timing right now. We have to follow a couple of steps first. So if you see this here, we are at probably a medium high temp here on the stove. If you see this little guy here, we want to bring the canner up to temp, and this will start venting out steam. And then we're going to want to let it vent for about 10 minutes before we put this weight on. You see these numbers here? There's 5 pounds pressure, there's 10 and 15. And once that has vented for 10 minutes, we will apply the appropriate pressure, which for tomato sauce is 10 pounds. And then with the gauge here, also gets up to 10 pounds pressure. That's when we can start timing. And for quarts of tomato sauce, it's 15 minutes. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see the steam, but you can hear it. So now we've reached to a point where there's a steady stream of steam coming out. So now we want to wait 10 minutes. Let this do its thing for 10 minutes before applying the weight. Okay, so we have vented for 10 minutes. So we're gonna find the 10 pounds pressure side and stick this on here. Watch your fingers with the steam. There we go. Now we're gonna come over here and we're gonna wait for the pressure gauge to show us 10 pounds pressure at least, even slightly above is fine. And once we reach 10 pounds, we can start timing for 15 minutes. Now, if this at any point during the processing drops below 10, you have to start timing all over again. It's all about the appropriate pressure and timing with safely canning, canned goods. Okay, so we are up to pressure slightly above. We're at 10 pounds, and this guy lets you know too because it starts making a bunch of rackets. So now we can start our timer for 15 minutes. If this goes a little bit above 10, which we're at, that's fine, but you do not want it to drop below 10 at all. See, he starts making a racket over here. Anyway, so you gotta watch this. So do not drop below 10 or you're gonna have to start your time over. So let's talk what happens if you don't have a pressure canner to preserve food. That's perfectly fine because you could do this with a boiling hot water bath. People have been preserving food that way long before we had access to these nifty pressure canners. And honestly, some people prefer that. I think the canner can be a little bit intimidating for some people. The processing time is just simply a little longer. So for tomato sauce, you want to submerge your filled jars into a boiling hot water bath. Make sure it comes back to a boil. You want about at least 1.5 inches of water above your jars that you're boiling. And once it's boiling again, for quart jars of tomato sauce, it's it's 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I do 45 because it just makes me feel better. So anyway, the perfectly safe, acceptable way to preserve food is boiling hot water baths. Okay, we processed for 15 minutes, so I'm just gonna kill the heat, and we aren't going to touch this thing at all until the gauge drops down to 0. Okay, you just gotta leave it safely. Do not touch that. Once that reaches 0, then we can pull this guy off to let the steam vent. This is under an incredible amount of pressure right now, so you do not want to touch that. So just let everything chill out a bit, and probably in about 20 minutes or so, we'll be back. All right, I'm back. I wasn't afraid to let this guy sit for a little bit. I didn't have any more tomatoes to process today, so I wasn't really in a hurry. So we were at 0 now, so now we can move this, and you can hear it even vent still a little bit more. But we're pretty much ready to open this guy now. So I'm gonna open the canner. Oops. My camera lady had to leave on me, so I'm doing this myself. But let me get this guy open. Always open lids, the canner lids up and away from you. Let the steam go that way, never open towards your face. So let me get this guy open and we'll take a look. Okay, so here we are, looking fabulous. So we want to remove these guys, put them onto a cutting board or a heat-proof surface of some kind. It's still like even boiling in there still. It gets crazy hot. Then what we do is we cover these with a towel, and you want to let anything canned rest for 24 hours before moving them to store. After 24 hours, always check your lids for a proper seal. If they haven't sealed, it's okay. Just move those jars to the fridge and use throughout the week. Those that did seal properly, wash the jars and move to store, and sauce is good for a year. So I hope you learned something today. I ended up with 9 lovely jars of sauce. Last year I got about 200, oop, we're steaming up here. I got about 200 jars. I'm hoping I can get about that this year too. It lasted me a whole year. I only just used my last jar of sauce a few weeks ago. So there really is, for me anyway, a benefit to this. I save probably thousands every year with the gardens and food preservation. It's fun, it's a lot of work, but for me, very fulfilling and certainly worth the time. Thank you for watching today.